Welcome to our June Hoard's Dairyman Monthly webinar. My name is Kylie Anderson. I'm the editor of Hoard's Dairyman magazine, and I'll serve for your host as today's webinar, which will focus on maternity barn and newborn calf care. If you're listening to this presentation live, you'll have access to a PDF of the slides that can be printed. The handout can be found in the handout section of the GoToWebinar control panel. In addition, if you have questions for our speaker, you can go ahead and type those in the questions section of the control panel and we'll address them in the presentation. Additionally, we'll have some poll questions as we go in here, and you can go answer those the same way to our Live from Hoard's Dairyman webcast organization. Today we welcome Dr. Barb Petersen to the Hoard's Dairyman webinar series. Dr. Petersen owns and operates Sunrise Veterinary Service PLLC, serving the Texas Panhandle since 2011. Her passion is supporting humans in agriculture who care for dairy and beef calves, heifers, and cattle. She grew up on an 80-cow Holstein dairy and farm where they crop corn, alfalfa, soybeans, and wheat in eastern Iowa. Barb puts the animal science and D.V.M. degrees she earned at Iowa State University to good use, focusing on the basics of animal husbandry. She earned her additional business and marketing skills via an MBA in 2020 at West Texas A&M. Her professional experience spans various industries, including marketing, diagnostics, technology, and nutrition. Barb, welcome to the webinar, and I look forward to hearing your presentation titled Start Smart, Maternity, Pen, and Newborn Calf Care Tips.
Thanks so much, Kylie, for the introduction. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, all good.
Okay, perfect. Well, wherever you are today, whether you're cruising down the road, you're eating lunch, or you're taking a moment, I just wanted to say thank you so much for joining. Thanks to Hoard's Webinars for the opportunity and Hoard's Magazine for the opportunity to join today. And yeah, my goals today are to talk about things that I've learned so far in my professional career about how to support mom and baby. And that baby right there is a very special baby. She was born early, so she got a little extra TLC at the beginning of her life. So just to orient everyone, because I realize that Hoard's has such a broad base of listeners and readers. So we are here in Texas in the red. And that star is the Panhandle of Texas, we lovingly call it. It's the northernmost counties in the state of Texas. And Texas is number 3 in dairy production in the United States. So right now, I think Texas has a little less than 300 registered dairies. And of those cows, there's almost 700,000 cows in Texas right now. That's an estimate. And of those girls, 80% of them live in the northernmost counties where I live and work. So I serve a broad base of clients from several hundred cows to tens of thousands of cows in this area. So it just kind of spans what we call the high plains, just to orient again everyone where we're at. So I wanted to share a few disclosures about me and about Sunrise Vet. Sunrise Vet, I founded initially here, like Kylie mentioned, in 2011. And the focus of my business is, I joke because it's June Dairy Month, the focus of my business is I'm the cheese in the grilled cheese sandwich. So as a veterinarian, I find it very professionally satisfying and fulfilling to think about if the leadership and owners and families are the bread, and then on one slice, and the other slice, of course, is everyone doing the work, and that can be anyone, right? Family members, employees, other folks that help on the farm. I want to be the support structure and the connector between the two. And you can see me here joking around with Jeremias. I love people, and the people on farm are my passion because they are the ones day to day doing and supporting the things that we're asking them to do. So when you have hundreds or tens of thousands of cows, it doesn't matter. You could have, I'm working together sometimes with 10 people or 100 people. So supporting them really, really, really matters. And then I always think about, as a veterinarian, I always think about my vet oath, because I want to use my professional knowledge and skills to advance animal health and bring everything back to the basics of animal husbandry, right? Doing right by the cow and doing right by the calf. And then finally, I'm going to show a lot of pictures. I'm going to show some videos. And please know that what I'm sharing today is my own professional and personal opinion. It doesn't reflect any of the companies or any of the types of products that I share. There's definitely benefits and opportunities with everything I'm going to show you. So please just keep that in mind. So let's get into it. Maternity, if I think about maternity, I think about a really, really specialized type of care, right? This is true for humans and this is true for animals. And maternity, I always think about it's this relationship between the cow, which on the right here, we've got a cow that we lovingly call Grandma on this farm. She's in her 6th lactation. So it's a relationship between cows like her, and I love to see her cud chewing after she's calved and enjoying some food. The newborn baby, the people, again, people taking care of them, and the environment that we work in. So I always think about those things together when I think about maternity. And then as humans, I am very guilty of this. I want to think, oh my gosh, I'm so good at multitasking. I can be doing multiple things at once, right? I can be thinking about multiple things at once. And I also think sometimes we're guilty of thinking that others could be multitasking as well. And the truth of it is, we as human beings, we're really, really poor at multitasking. So sometimes we need very simple tools to help us do our day jobs. And think about maternity. It might look like nothing is going on, but promise you, something is always going on. And it doesn't matter how many cows you have, something is always going on because you're caring for a new mom, you're warming up colostrum, you're feeding a baby, you're moving a baby, you're anything, right? Anything and everything. So I'm just thinking about how do we help the humans of ag taking care of these girls? So I promise you, I'm going to show you 2 different images that have a ton of words, and that's not the point of this. I just think about if we had to write a job description for maternity, what would it say? And I think about it in 3 big buckets. I think about, first of all, the cow, the calf, and the environment. So I'll show those really quickly. Lots of specific tasks for cow care. Lots and lots. Anything that's in parentheses is variable by farm. A lot of calf specific tasks, right? We think about anything and everything related to caring for a newborn, as well as identifying and record keeping and health and care. And then finally, yeah, that 3rd big bucket, of course, is the environment, about moving animals, about cleaning. There's always things that need to be cleaned in maternity, about bedding. And as we chatted about before the webinar started, we're always thinking about here, how do we prep for severe weather? That's not true just here, it's true everywhere. So then, okay, we've got all these different descriptions of things we want to do, and everything's happening all at once. So this isn't like a linear process all the time, but imagine we can take some of these tasks and help to create a system where they're easier to do, and it does create more of a linear thought process when you do each task. So the other thing I'll share is when we think about maternity, we think about all the what I call additional tasks, but these are routine tasks on many, many dairies. We're collecting samples. We might be sorting cattle or loading newborn babies to either move to a designated calf area or to go to a calf grower. And you see those things I have highlighted in gray, pushing up feed. So a big thing here, of course, is sometimes because the maternity team has other job duties, they leave the maternity area for a period of time to go make sure that feed on flat bunks is pushed closer so the girls can reach it, right? So milk cows, dry cows, heifers. And what that means sometimes is as our farms grow larger, they may spend, that person that's away from the maternity area may spend more time making the rounds, pushing up feed, potentially leaving a deficit in your maternity area. So something to think about. Some of the farms I work together with, they've separated that task out of maternity. So they have somebody totally separate that will bring feed to the milk cows. The other one is that I've highlighted is sometimes we have girls that have challenges day and night, and maybe more so at night just because we have sometimes fewer people working on farm at the time. And the maternity person or persons may be called to go help out with a cow that needs extra attention. or may come to the main parlor and say, hey, we need help walking these fresh heifers onto the parlor, into the parlor, onto the rotary. Could you please come help us? So those two things I think are the biggest, maybe some of the biggest challenges in the additional tasks, just because at times it can deviate that person away from the maternity area. And then yes, lots and lots of other things. And of course, everyone's favorite, as assigned by your supervisor or your team leader or family member, what they think you should be doing. So again, the goal here of today's discussion is to bring some high-level tips to help support the folks doing the work. And here's Marcelino in front of one of his workstations. I want to help people like Marcelino to do his job and feel comfortable and not feel overworked, but also have the time to think about, okay, what are the different tasks I need to do, and how do I do them effectively, and how do I provide the best possible care to the cows and calves that I'm charged with caring for. And again, I want to say this, as a veterinarian, I respect all my fellow colleagues, and everything I share today is never meant to supersede any advice that your herd veterinarian may give to you. So please keep that in mind. These are suggestions from things I've seen with my own clients and things I've seen in this part of the world. So the roadmap today are three big things. Okay, we're going to talk about the cow, her environment, and some record keeping tasks. That's number one. The second thing is to talk about the newborn baby and some specific tasks that can help him or her. And then finally, I wanted to share some colostrum feeding updates, because there's been such this bloom of information and research and additional focus on colostrum. I really think that's worth touching on as a part of maternity. And yes, the storm is looming in the background here in this picture. This is a very typical, when you can watch your dog run away for 3 days here in the Panhandle and you see a storm building from quite a ways away. Okay, so let's talk about mamas. Let's think about the folks that we're asking, right, to support these cows calving in maternity, close up to calving, right, dry cows and close up cows. Probably one of the most simple things I can think of is, do we make it easy for those folks that are working in maternity, whether it's alone or in a team, do we make it easy for them to identify who is going to calve this week, and what type potentially of bull were they last bred to? I say bull, I mean semen, I mean replacement heifer, or I mean beef, crossbred calf. What type of calf are they expecting? Because it always happens. You're never going to have one animal calve at once. You may have more than one animal calving at the same time. So you can see her on the left in this image. I love this. This is like a flip out desk in one of my maternity areas of one of my clients. And on the left here, you've got animals that are due to what we know as a bull breeding. And then on the right, it's kind of the same thing. We have animals as well. So we have a heifer list and a cow list. Okay, so we know who's due to calve and who potentially, of all the girls in close-up, heifer close-up and cow close-up, who are they due to? And you can see it up top in the far right-hand corner. There's a headlamp up there. So the little details always stick out in every single image. So I challenge you to find them and think about them, because a headlamp is critical. We have a lot of open lot farms, and all that means is just a large, dry, open pen with dry bedding and shades. And that oftentimes is the location that these girls are hanging out and waiting to calve. So a headlamp is critical. And of course, we've got gloves and sleeves in this image too. So here's my ask. If at all possible, provide the due date in an easy to find format. And if the calf should be a heifer or should be a dairy beef cross, right? If they're bred to a Charolais or Angus or semi-Angus bull, make sure it's really, really clear to those in maternity what that is. And then training and teaching is where I can come in and help support, or people like me can come in and help support that. Training on not only paper lists. I have some clients that everyone prefers to use paper lists. That's totally fine. It gives everyone a guidepost on where to look, because every week they post a new list. You can see that list on the left there, the paper list. It's got her ID, her due date. And again, these are just specifically, these were bred to an Angus bull. On that middle image there, you've got an image. Again, this is not meant to be an advertisement for any particular type of software, but this is a cow card from Dairy Comp, and it's just showing us, this is the English version, but it's showing us, okay, she was bred to a Charolais bull, in January. And now if you click to that next items tab, it would give you how pregnant she is and her due date. And then finally, the same thing, bred to a sex Holstein bull. But then also, if you look at this one, it's in Spanish. So many of the people I work with, Spanish is their first language. And so thankfully for me, they're very patient with me, and we speak a combination all the time of Spanish and English and Spanglish. This is another big one to think about when I think about mama and I think about the people caring for her, is no matter what your days look like, we're always talking about the weather here, it seems like, but the weather can change so quickly. It's critical to have an area that you can work in to collect colostrum, to help a cow having challenges calving. So imagine this facility has 3 roll-up doors. You can see the one open in the back, that's open to the south. I've got 2 alleyways, 2 working chutes. I've got great flooring here. I've got the calf area peeking out on the left side with those elevated hutch crates, the elevated tenderfoot crates. And then behind me, I know you can't see it in this picture, but there's another roll-up door. And then of course we've got colostrum, we got milking equipment here. We've got the hose for cleaning. We've got warm water. There's a little workstation in the back. So what's neat about this area is we have a really nice area. Anytime we need to examine a cow, we can walk her in here. And the other thing to think about is, I'm going to show some more pictures of this area. A lot of the clients I work together with, they will either milk and collect colostrum right after she calves, or they will group milk, right? So they will say, okay, every 4 hours or every 6 hours on this interval, we're gonna milk and collect colostrum on anyone that has calved in that interval. And sometimes it looks like this, and sometimes it looks like almost like a little special needs parlor. So let me show you some more pictures of what I'm talking about. So to orient you, this is that same maternity, what we would call maternity barn. This is the alleyway looking east. So on the far left corner, that's the barn I just showed the pictures of the inside of. So this shows the water trough access on the south side. And if you notice, there's gates there on that far left-hand side. Sometimes after these cows calve, we temporarily put them in these pens, right? We're getting them queued up because we know we're going to milk them in a few hours. And the only challenge with that is, here's the water trough here on the far right side. Those girls won't have water access for a period of time after they calve, unless we've given them a bucket of water in the chute area, or we bring them water in these pens. So just something to think about. I just cannot imagine that, but those girls are so thirsty after they've calved. So making sure that the cow, we get so focused on colostrum, we have to make sure, like, does mom have water after she calves? So if I turn the other direction, so imagine I'm now, instead of looking east, I'm looking west. Okay, I've got the curtain on the north side. You see how these pens are set up. They're a great space to catch an animal for a period of time. But the thing to think about is the feed, you can barely see it on that far side of the barn where the end of the shade ends. That's where those girls have feed access. So the same thing is true. On accident, if we have girls in these catch pens, they don't have feed and water access temporarily. And post-calving, that's critical. So I just always think about these things. I'm thinking about mom, and I'm thinking about the folks taking care of her, is they're thinking about it too. And on accident, right, they have her kind of queued up to collect colostrum. Ideally, we need to find a way that makes sure that she has food and water access, both before and after calving, even though before calving, she may barely touch. As you all know, she barely touch the feed and will drink some water. And the only other thing I would suggest here is that if you would like to target supplementation, like for instance, this is example is calcium. If you want to give calcium, let's say to girls that are, having their third calf and older, or a certain age, or a certain breed, or a certain type that you've had challenges with, please provide a list of those moms that are eligible back to your maternity crew, because that just helps them to understand. It's one thing if you have numerical tags, sequential tags, and everything's in sequence, but that's not always true. And sometimes we have animals with different tags, or adult tags and youth tags, or tags from animals that we have purchased. So we try to make it so that the folks, like if I'm working in maternity, Well, then shoot, I would love a list to know, okay, if she comes in and she calves, then she needs calcium, a calcium bolus. And the other thing to note, you'll see the different types of calcium in this pictures. It's not an endorsement for any of these types, but in the right-hand photo, this is a farm that has now 2 different types of boluses on the same location. And one of the employees, his name's Chewy, he asked me, he said, are these the same thing? So just be prepared if we make a change of any kind, that those questions can come up, because just like me, I want to know, hey, is this the same thing? Am I following the right steps? I want to make sure she gets calcium. Is this all the same, yes or no? So I'm going to pause here really quickly. I want to do a poll question real quick. So I think Kylene has this set up that you can answer in the chat or maybe in the Q&A section. So if you think about your own dairy farm or a farm you support if you're not a primary farm owner, is your maternity area staffed with at least 1 employee around the clock? So 1 would be yes, 24/7. 2 would be yes, we have someone 24/7, but the one person overseeing maternity has other responsibilities that could take them away from maternity. Number 3, it's not staffed 24/7, but we use technology to help bridge those gaps, right? Whether it's collars or indwelling boluses or cameras. And then finally, no, it's not staffed around the clock, and whoever comes in on the next shift might have more new babies or fresh moms to fetch. So I'll give it here like 30 to 60 seconds and let everyone vote. And Kylene, if you could update me, that's the one part that I can't see. So if you would update me, that'd be great.
You bet. We're getting answers coming in right now.
Give it another like 20 seconds. Okay, what do you got?
We have an even spread in the answers.
Okay.
Between 1, 2, 3, and
Michael
4.
Monks. Fascinating. Okay. Okay, this is great. This is great because this is, again, this is an area that I think will continue to evolve. So first of all, thank you everyone for voting. And again, this is an example of how perhaps technology could bridge that gap of the ideal, I think, would be to have some type of monitoring around the clock, because it becomes harder and harder as you have groups of animals to know to correctly identify whose baby that is, right? As soon as a cow has a baby, all the cows are up and around her and everyone wants to lick that baby and claim that baby. And if you think about, the opportunities that technology could present, even just the simplest, I have some clients that have some very, very simple Wi-Fi cameras. They use their internet or they use Starlink to support them. Then others have investigated using something that actually identifies the cow. Like this is the EverAg example is the EverAg system. It's called Maternity Ward. It actually identifies the cow and can signal you when she's in labor. Yeah, and same thing is true. You can get kind of an imminent calving alert from a bolus like Snacks Tech. So I think there's more to come on this. I'm really, really excited about this. And I also want to be cautious about this because I always think about the people. We have to make sure that their workload is feasible during the day. So I always think about how is technology a support and not a stick. Okay, so the only other thing I'd love to talk about here on the cows is record keeping. And everyone does record keeping a little bit differently. And I think there's advantages and maybe opportunities for whatever type of record keeping that you use. So let's talk about something that I lovingly call the notebook. And the notebook is exactly what you think it is, right? A notebook is a paper notebook in your maternity area that anybody who works in maternity can record, moms who calved, the sex of the baby, what time the calving occurred at, what tag we tagged the baby with, what time calving finished, colostrum feeding, twins or heifers, if there was any problems, if an animal was presented dead on arrival, all those things you can see in these 2 notebooks. And the thing always I think about with notebooks is it's a free-for-all. You can record whatever you want to record on the notebook. And so that's both a positive and a negative, because there's definitely things that we should record, that we need to record. And the goal here is just to try to record those things more consistently, because there's usually, when you freshen your animals or you record fresh data, there's usually kind of a baseline that you love to have. And then over time, there's other things that can add value, such as the weight of the calf, for example. So there's nothing wrong with the notebook. This is kind of the baseline for, hey, we need to start keeping some records in maternity. If we have a notebook, then we can capture what we're asking for. But just keep in mind, if there aren't any fillable forms or any guidelines, it will be exactly what you think it is. It's kind of a free-for-all. And of course, the technician as well may or may not be noted on here. The next level is what I would describe as fillable forms. So if you orient yourself, if you look at the top left of the screen, and again, thinking we're mostly working in the Spanish language here. So we have the date, the cow's ID, the sex, and you'll see, you know, bull and heifer, right, or becerro y hembra, and the number that we assign to the baby, the colostrum feeding times, and then whether or not it got entered into the program that we use, and whether or not when the cow got moved to the fresh pen. And so, yeah, you can quickly scan this list and see, okay, if there's an animal that had challenges or who had twins, or the intervals in the colostrum feeding, that becomes really, really important, is to see those intervals on your colostrum feeding. Same thing on the top right. This is a similar form, similar idea, and it just is all about colostrum feeding data collection. So ID of the calf, the time the calf was born, and what time basically did we give the first bottle and who gave it. So Samuel and Victor gave these bottles to these calves. And then on the bottom right, similar idea for a calving log, the date, the ID of the cow who calved, start time. They didn't actually finish the end time, which that's okay. If there's any difficulty here from 1 to 5, they will note it. Of course, with 5 being a veterinarian's intervention and 1 is completely unassisted, there's a chart on the wall that talks about what those codes mean. The ID of the calf, who fed colostrum, and any other comments. You can see in the comments they have the weight of these babies, and these are Jersey babies, so 61 pounds and 57 pounds. This one, shifting gears again, imagine you take a fillable form and you add stickers. I absolutely love this system because the manager pre-prints, so on the far left, just to orient you, they pre-print a bunch of stickers that show the ID of the cow, that's in red, underlined, the last known sire that was used, so who was the last bull that we believe settled this cow or heifer, and then the due date. And so then the folks in maternity have this sticker book, and when a cow calves, and I know I'm guilty of this too, like, is that a 7 or is that a 1? Or is that a 2, right? They just grab that sticker, they put it in the book right there, they write the date, again, male or female. Same thing on the tags. They purchase sets of tags that have a sticker associated with them that has the electronic ID and the calf ID, so kind of as a paired set. They grab that sticker, they put the sticker in the book, and then you have immediately assistance on matching cow and baby. And then, yes, you have other columns there on the right, okay, about where the cow got moved to, who the technician was. And in this system, they have some just-in-time calving pens. So you can see where it says camas. Camas means the beds, and corrals would mean the little pens, little calving pens. And finally, on the far right, you have the E's. And then whenever this data gets entered into their main system, they just put a highlight mark through it to mark like, okay, we're good. You can tell by the thickness of this ream of papers, there's a bunch of records here. So anytime we have questions, you can go back and look at these. So the sticker book is awesome. So let's shift gears. Let's shift gears and talk about calves. And again, I'm always thinking about how do we support humans, the human portion of the calf caretaking. This is a purpose-built maternity area that was built about 6 years ago. And the things I love about this area are you have a facility that's pretty easy to clean because you can lift those center gates, the center partitions out. You have a nice wide gate in the front that swings open. You have heat, you have curtains on the sides, there's heater up top, and you can barely see it, that little green little green thing on the left there, that's where they weigh their babies at. That's their calf scale. And then, yeah, nice, clean, dry, comfortable. So let's think about that, but let's think about the human beings doing this work as well. Okay, we got to start with something here that is very challenging and very, very, very important, is umbilical care. So we think about the umbilical, right? The navel. This is the super highway to the calf's liver and bloodstream. You can see every time I go on farm, I'm always going to be looking at your dip cups and always looking at the ways that people apply, whether it's iodine, whether it's any type of navel dip. I want to know how you do it and how often you do it. Okay, so you can see here, you would think only the second from the left, the dip cup there with the blue cap is the only one that passes. Well, technically this one on the right next to it would also pass. All that juiciness is on the outside of that cup. So those two are pretty clean, pretty good shape. And you'll see something here on the far right that is an absolute challenge. And I want to show a demonstration, so I'm hoping this will show on the video. So you see that on the right-hand side there, you got a pair of scissors in the fence. A lot of people are really, really tempted to cut navels. And so a colleague of mine mentioned this to me, and now I like to demonstrate it. So I have here a palpation sleeve, right? This is a breeding glove, okay? Imagine that this is your belly button, okay? Imagine this is your umbilical cord, this is your navel. When I pull and I try to stretch this, imagine the calf is being born, and this is eventually is going to snap, right? As I pull, it gets thinner and thinner and thinner and thinner and thinner until eventually it will break. Now, as you can see, this, as it gets thinner, this piece here in the middle, it really starts to thin, and it starts to almost like pinch, create a seal, starts to close. You'll notice if you've ever tried to put your fingers all the way through these fingers, they start to thin out, and you really have to push your hand through to get through. So you have a nice kind of a tight seal. This is closed. If I come back through here and I cut this belly button, fake belly button, with a pair of scissors with a nice clean cut like this, guess what? Now I have a nice wide opening. You might be thinking, well, gosh, why does that matter? I don't want to have the umbilicus, the navel, to have such a long cord. The reason this matters is these are two calves that I had opened up, so done a post-mortem investigation on to orient you that imagine that calf's head and lungs and heart is to the right, and on the left you have the abdomen, and the thing I'm holding in my hand is the remnants of the umbilical vein, which that is the portal to the liver. So I'm going to click here, this one on the right, and you can see both of these are unfortunately very infected. This one here on the right, you've got quite a bit of peritonitis, so inflammation and infection of the abdomen. I'm going to click on this because I'm going to tug, okay? I'm tugging, so you can see this is unfortunately, the direct superhighway from that navel straight to the liver. So if we on accident have a situation where we're not keeping navels clean and as dry as possible, or we're cutting navels. I know this one has quite a long umbilicus, but if you imagine that you have a situation where you create even more of an opening, that just then provides a superhighway for an infection. So these images, I hope, help demonstrate how the navel care is so important. And I apologize, I don't have a picture of what this should look like. It should just look like a nice, skinny, clean little vein to a nice, healthy liver. But I only take pictures of the abnormal things, it seems like. So, okay. So navel care, big opportunity for us supporting these calves. Let's talk about colostrum feeding, because this is another area that I think, if I'm thinking about the times I have worked in a maternity area, this one's really hard when you have a lot of calves to care for. So after observing many different maternity areas, one of the things I have observed that I thought was super cool was, you see on the far left-hand side there, it looks like the wristbands, almost like you're going to go to an amusement park or go to a concert. Imagine that after a calf is born, you can record vital information about that calf on the wristband, put it on the calf's leg loosely, and then that calf has a visual ID of maybe it's who that calf's mom is. Maybe it's the time it was born. Maybe it's the time of first feeding, whatever information you want to capture about that calf, it's on the calf in a way that some people do not like to use spray paint or chalk or any type of adhesive. And then once the calf is 2 to 3 days old, just cut that off. And that then gives you a period of time where you can identify that calf. And you can have different colors, of course, for bulls and heifers or replacements in beef. And on the right here, you've got a couple things in this image. You've got those, you've got their paperwork on the left there, so they have fillable forms. You have 2 different types of ear tags. You have a refractometer up on the top right, that's the Misco in blue. And then smack dab in the middle, you've got what we would call back tags, right? So a tag that you can apply with that Kmart adhesive. And I'll show you some images of how you can use temporarily, right? Apply a back tag to your babes to identify, okay, these are the times of the day that we need to feed colostrum in AM and PM. So now when I go look at the calf, I don't then need to go back and look at the paperwork. I can just look at the calf and say, oh, this calf on the top left got colostrum at 11:15 in the morning and 8:15 in the evening. Okay. And then this deer in particular, if they spray paint it pink, it means that has been completed. Same thing in the middle. That tag on that little babe's head is who his mom is. That's how this dairy chooses to use those tags. Then in the far right, top right-hand corner, you've got the times for colostrum feeding in AM and PM. So just, again, it help the folks that are the ones that are responsible for doing the feedings. This one I love. This is just an opportunity to talk about how do we chill excess colostrum immediately post collection. So this client, you can get an ice maker. They got from Dollar General a freezer. They freeze palpation sleeves, breeding sleeves of water, and then once they collect colostrum, they have basically a cut barrel. Break that bag, then you have a nice ice bath, and the new bottles of colostrum go in immediately that are extra. Same thing with warming up colostrum. There's so many ways to do this, and there's definitely ways to help standardize and also think about, if I put a bottle, far left side, if I put a bottle in that water, it's however wide open I want to open those valves, right? And maybe however much time I need to feed this calf. And that's when on accident, I can overheat that colostrum, and I can create a situation where I made a bacterial problem that I didn't intend to. On the middle there, you've got the sous vide. So if you cook, like to slow cook or like to use that as a cooking method, it's just basically a water circulator with a warmer. So this is constantly circulating warm water in a cooler. So think of this like a homemade colostrum reheater warmer. Then the far right, that's just the opening of Dairy Tech's Matilda. Same thing, it's a circulating water bath. And each of these can speed up the time from the time you place the bag to the time you place the bottle to when the colostrum is ready. So sometimes it's as little as 20 to 30 minutes. And again, there's so many organizational systems available for storing and cataloging colostrum. Thinking about bags, thinking about bottles, thinking about how do we help simplify the recording of all of this. And the cartridges, I do think, help quite a bit, because we've all seen freezers and fridges that have bags that unfortunately they're flat when you fill them, and then it takes some time for them to become solid, and they flop all over the place and they leak. So having the cartridges really does help. And in that system, the cartridge is rotating. The ColoQuick is rotating either as it's pasteurizing or as it's warming. And so it really helps to shorten the time. Again, opportunities here for organization. This is just a walk-in blast freezer with colostrum organized on shelves. Just a great way to identify colostrum by brick score. And then this one I love. You've heard bulk milk tank alarms, but how about a dinner bell, a school bell when your colostrum is ready? So I really hope that y'all can hear this. This is the only video I think that sound is critical on. So hopefully you can hear this. So I'm panning the maternity area here. Okay, got some calving pens. We've got a babe. Okay, got individual calving stalls. And now I'm walking to the colostrum, basically prep area, storage area, pasteurizing area. And then here's our ColoQuick unit. And yes, pasteurizer's ready. Pasteurizer's done its cycle. So these are the little things I think that can help. I mean, we can set all the timers, we can set reminders on our phones, we can have an idea of when we need to feed, but it's really, really hard to ignore a very annoying bell that fills up the entire sound of your maternity area. Okay, so finally, I want to wrap up here. We talked about cows and their environment and people and calves. Just want to talk really quickly about paradigm shifts about feeding colostrum and how much colostrum we feed in Brix testing. So the ideal, right? The ideal would be if you think about how colostrum is absorbed in an ideal situation. To maximize absorption, we'd love to feed colostrum within the first 2 to 4 hours after a calf is born. So let's think about how much do we feed? How much do we feed that first time? And this is where I think the paradigm shift can come into play. So our traditional goals, right? We think about quantity. We've talked a lot about 10% of body weight and 5% for the second feeding, and about quality, right? 50 grams per liter, that we talk about that Brix score of 22. And I would love to challenge everyone to think about some goals that I think we can update as an industry based on new research and based on more closely mimicking cow-calf systems. Is I want to think about quantity in terms of amount of IgG per feeding. So 200 to 300 grams of IgG first feeding and 100 to 200 grams in the second feeding. And then quality, again, let's think about this from grams per liter of the liters that we feed for the first feeding, of bumping that to 75, okay? And it'll ask me, how the heck are we gonna do this? We will touch on that right now, but my thought is, how do we reach each calf's IgG goals without overwhelming the stomach? Because the bottom line is we cannot mess with the gut, period. And on accident, sometimes we do when we're trying to reach our goals. So quick poll question. For your first colostrum feeding, how much colostrum do you offer to new calves? So we've got 5 options. Sorry, 2 liters, half gallon basically, 3 liters, basically almost 3/4 of a gallon. 4 liters would be a gallon or a little bit more, all those tubed. The 4th option is we allow calves to suckle colostrum, and then we give more if the calf is still suckling and wants more colostrum. And finally, number 5, our calves nerve colostrum straight from their mom. So I will, Kylie, I'll ask you here in about 45 seconds for some feedback on this poll question.
Great. And just for those in the audience, if you want to use the chat function, should be at the top. You can chat to the live webcast from Hordes as the direct message, and we can capture your response there, either 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. We'll give everyone just a moment to answer.
I can't see it, but I know people are voting. So thank you so much for continuing to vote and give feedback. There's no wrong answers. This is just a curiosity. All right, Kylie, how are we looking?
Overwhelmingly votes for 3, a few votes for 4, and 1 vote for 5.
Oh, interesting. Okay. So overwhelmingly, okay, gallon, right? A gallon of colostrum, and that has been, I feel like, ingrained in our brains that this is what we do. Okay, so I would love for just a second to challenge that idea. So how do we get to this idea of how do we feed 4 liters? How do we feed a gallon first feeding? And how do we get to this idea that, more is better, right? More volume is better. So let's think about this. Let's work backwards. The previous goal for first feeding of colostrum was 200 grams of IgG. Okay, so we're talking IgG, 200 grams. So if we have colostrum, again, we've had this metric of 22 Brix, right? 22 Brix. Then we assume that colostrum of 22 Brix was 50 grams per liter. So if your goal is 200 grams and you divide it by 50 grams per liter, then that by default brings you to a 4-liter volume, right? If I want 200 grams and at my colostrum test 50 grams per liter, I've got to feed a gallon. And 4 liters, right, of colostrum, a gallon, right? A gallon weighs almost 9 pounds, right? And so for easy math, if we think about the birth weight, we're going to think about Holstein heifers here for just a second. 9 pounds to a 90-pound Holstein is 10% of our body weight, right? So then all of a sudden, magically, we get to 10%. And as this has evolved, we fed more and more colostrum, trying to make sure, like, hey, I really want that high serum total protein score, right? I'm going to draw blood a day, at least, within that 2 to 7 day window, and I want my colostrum scores to be high, right? Used to be 5.5, now our target's 5.8 to 6.2 and above. We're going to get it, right? We're going to chase health outcomes as we do this. And the reality of doing this is we would like to think about the mechanics of her abomasum, right? So her true stomach. We've got to know, first of all, in order to talk about how do we dial that back just a little bit and not sacrifice on health, in fact, improve health, because that's our goal. We've got to know the BRIC score. So here I've got 2 examples. The MISCO on the left is my MISCO, just showing a BRIC score of 20.8. And then you've got something that's brand new. I've only seen this in pictures and videos, but this is kind of neat. It's an indwelling, basically BRICS sensor for colostrum. I believe if you were wanting to pool this, that's pretty neat because it gives you a real-time BRIC score. So we've got to know what the BRIC score is in order to challenge our paradigm about how much to feed. So that's number 1. Okay, this is one of 2 studies I want to show you really quick about colostrum feeding and about BRICS. That's new and that's different. Okay, so what Dr. Don Sockett at University of Wisconsin and Tom Earlywine and others in 2023 did, this is published in Frontiers of Vet Science Journal. What they did is they took 184 colostrum samples from 4 different dairies. And what they did is they tested them for BRICS. They heated them to cow body temperature, and they tested BRICS just like a MISCO would. And then they tested radial immunodiffusion, and that's kind of the gold standard, okay? So on this chart here, on the letter A on the left side, you'll see what we would call a linear regression. So all this is showing us is there's a pretty good fit here, right? You got a pretty good cluster in this line. So that R squared value is pretty low, that 0.8, the goodness of fit. It's pretty tight, right? You got a nice trend line there. But the reality of it is, if you shift your eyes to part B here, on that x-axis you have the predicted grams per liter, and on the y-axis you have the actual. You can see there's a really, really big spread. And so what Dr. Sockett and others thought was, okay, imagine if I'm going to use a 22 BRICS as we have been using. If I use the linear model on the left, this is going to predict almost 75 grams per liter, which is amazing. But we know after their testing that the true value is plus or minus 42.5. So the true value is could be as low as 32 and could be as high as 117 grams per liter of IgG with 95% confidence. So what Dr. Sockett did is say, okay, I want to know what is the minimum estimated colostrum concentration in grams per liter at the different BRIC scores. And again, they're erring on the side of that imagine the colostrum may totally have more IgGs, but let's make sure that we're hitting the minimum goal. And this is where the paradigm shift comes in, because if we want to feed a smaller volume of colostrum, our target BRIC score needs to be closer to 25%, because that will give us 75 grams per liter, allowing us basically to feed more grams of IgG in a smaller volume. And you're thinking, gosh, Barb, why are you going on and on and on about volume of colostrum? Well, I will show you that right now. And real quick, if I am on farm and I'm doing support work for maternity, I'm going to check out all the areas on the farm. And if I pop in your freezer or your fridge and I see all your colostrum, and again, these are just pictures of different bags of colostrum. If all your colostrum is dated and marked with 22 BRICS, well, I'm going to check to make sure your refractometer is calculated, and I'm probably going to spot check some of this colostrum too. because I feel like now everyone understands that 22 is the number. Therefore, sometimes bags get marked by default as 22. Maybe they don't test 22. Hopefully they test better, but maybe they don't. And the other thing, I love this term, forensic medicine. If your protocol is to use a single-use feeding tube once, and that's your program, and then again, I love to come do maternity support work, and I will dumpster dive and dive in trash cans and look around. If there are extra tubes in solution somewhere, or extra tubes that are being collected to be reused, then it's just a reminder, hey, we're actually reusing tubes that were kind of meant to be a single-use device. So these are the things I think about, again, as I'm thinking about the basics, right, of colostrum feeding and cleanliness. Okay, we're gonna get to volume, and this is the final poll question. If you feed a second feeding of colostrum, how do you offer it to your calves, right? Do you feed it via a tube feeder? Do you offer them a bottle of colostrum with a nipple for the second feeding? You don't offer a second feeding because you fed them a gallon the first time and that volume is sufficient? Or finally, are the calves nursing their colostrum from mom basically the entire first day of their life? We'll open that up real quick.
And again,
no wrong answers.
Yeah, and everything, I think everyone's got the hang of the chat function, so you can just chat 1, 2, 3, or 4.
Yep.
We'll get that info.
Give it another 30 seconds here, and then we'll see what the votes look like. Okay, Kylie, how we look?
All right, we have majority are 2 with a couple of votes on 1 and 3.
Okay. I'm biased. I do love to hear that. Via offering it free choice, basically with a nipple bottle, and we're gonna go over the tubing and feeding a second feeding right now. So thank you for voting and giving feedback. So let's think about what is the safe, potentially, I'm going to say safe with air quotes because obviously a stomach can expand. We know this if we go eat at a buffet or we have a wonderful Thanksgiving dinner and we gorge ourselves. But how much volume could a calf's abomasum, the true stomach, right, of the calf, really be capable of holding without causing a problem? And so there was a study that was done, this is 20 years ago now, but it's pretty cool stuff, where calves they were a little bit older, they were 30 days old, so a month old, and they were allowed to nurse from a bottle a quarter to a half liter of colostrum, and then and free choice basically, and they had these small meals. Then after that they finished their meals, the folks that ran this trial ultrasounded them, and so they wanted to know what was the dimension of that true stomach. So they're kind of scanning their abdomen to take a peek at what's going on in there. And most of them had, about think about like a 5x7 photograph, or think about, I realize it's a 3D structure, but that's what they could visualize, okay? And after they had about 3 liters total of milk, many of the calves didn't drink up to that much volume, and some drank 3 liters. So there was a super strong correlation, of course, between how much milk was suckled and then the measurements of the stomach. And that makes sense, right? As we consume food, our stomach will expand according usually to how much volume we've eaten. And if I go, these calves are a little older, so I'm thinking about what is it like that very first day? I know this picture says first week, but the total volume of all the compartments of the calf's stomach total is about 3 to 4 liters. And the true stomach, the abomasum, right, could be maybe 1 to 2 liters, maybe a little bit more if it's 60% approximately. Because the other parts of the stomach, if you've ever had a chance to open one up, they're not very well developed, right? The abomasum is the part of the stomach that's very, very well developed because the calf is a monogastric at that point, not a ruminant. So I'm a visual person. I have to have visuals for everything. So again, keep in mind, this is a 2D image and we're thinking about a 3D thing. So, okay, in the gray on the top left, just imagine with me, this is a 5x7 image, not to scale, but this is what represented what that abomasum looked like in 2005 when the folks scanned their abdomen with an ultrasound probe after calves had drank 3 liters, okay, 5x7. Now, in 2024, there's a new case report that came out from University of Wisconsin that talked about calves that basically received a gallon of colostrum tubed and then another half gallon of colostrum tubed. I think the window was either 6 hours or 8 hours, and that the calf colicked and died. And on examination, the calf had a really, really big colostrum curd, and the curd measured basically 6 inches by 11 inches. So you think about, okay, the stomach can expand. It can expand a bunch. That is a massive colostrum curd in a young calf. So it goes back to this whole discussion about how do you feed that second feeding of colostrum? And I have a client that we have gone through this challenge. So just to orient you, again, the picture on the left is a calf that is 1 day old. It has passed away suddenly. It didn't have scours. I realize in this photo, you can probably appreciate on the lung fields, closer to the rib cage at the top, there's some red coloration. That's just what we would call blood splash. When the animal dies, the tiny little capillaries can burst. Those lungs are normal, heart is normal. My finger is pointing to that stomach, that abomasum, right? You see all the blood vessels and all the vasculature are kind of dark and purple and standing out. When I open up that true stomach, that abomasum, this is the curd on the right that was inside. You talk about cuajo, you talk about cheese making, that's some serious curd right there. That curd, so I have size 9 boots. The curd was like as big as my boot, which is almost like basically 12 inches by 7.5 inches. It's huge, right? So going back to the whole thing about volume, this farm was feeding back to back 2 feedings of colostrum via esophageal tube feeder. And so we think about that. How do we've got to shift how we feed colostrum, potentially trying to take care of that abomasum and help maximize our absorption of IgG. So again, back to what I just shared as a paradigm shift, feed within the first 2 to 4 hours, the grams of IgG. Second feeding, this is where it gets critical, is we need to let the calf choose, right? If we're 8 to 12 hours after the first feeding, the calf needs choice at that point, because maybe that curd has formed, but none of it has moved along. And how the heck do we do this and make it practical for the people doing the maternity support work, right? So we're going to test and feed colostrum for that first feeding that's 25% Brix or greater. So 3 liters of 25% Brix guarantees 75 grams per liter. It guarantees your 225 grams of IgG, and likely more, just thinking about how Dr. Sockett and others created those cutoffs. So we want to improve that health of that stomach, right? And we want to try to shorten that interval. I don't know how many times if we've fed a big colostrum meal that those calves then don't want to drink milk. You know, sometimes they're just kind of listless and laying there as they rest and digest. But really, it's a challenge, because then they don't want to eat the next meal, even that they're offered, sometimes even for a long period of time. So the benefits here, right? You give time for that sweet curd. Not all cows will form a colostrum curd, but when the whey is released, the whey is a magical protein fraction that contains IgG. So then you start to get absorption in about 3 hours post-feeding, and the whole curd is absorbed in about 12 to 18 hours. This would increase absorption of IgG if we can support a system that feeds a smaller volume. And then yes, the calf essentially would assume until he or she is full, he or she is satiated in that second feeding. So I love it. I love it. If you're feeding a bottle right now, please continue doing that. And then if your colostrum tests 22 Brix or lower, let's work to find out why. Because not all your heifer colostrum will test low. Maybe you aren't collecting that right now. Maybe your cow colostrum is testing low. Let's examine the time from calving to colostrum collection. Let's examine maybe the stress on accident we put on mama after she calves. Let's think about what are we going to do with that colostrum that tests lower than we would like it to, you know, in that 22 to 25 range. If it's lower than that, second feeding, transition milk, there's opportunities to market that colostrum and sell it. And then in times when your Brix score is low, you could talk about fortifying, and please be careful with that, because it's a whole other topic, is to talk about osmolality, which is basically water and fluid can get drawn into a space if you feed a high solids diet. And then, yeah, You can freeze and build up a bank of liquid yellow gold if you have extra colostrum. And then finally, I just want to wrap up with what are the variables that we can control and support, thinking about the humans taking care of babies. So we can control the timing to maximize efficiency of absorption of IgG. So again, first feeding, ideally within the first 2 hours. I have folks that here that are sometimes within the first hour or two of life. Second feeding, nipple bottle only, right? Let the calf determine how much they want to drink. Allow for higher efficiency of absorption. So if we have a smaller volume of colostrum, you actually have a higher efficiency of absorption. So this is a total paradigm shift because I'm asking folks to consider feeding a much smaller volume, 6 to 8% in the first 24 hours total. Using, again, you've got it, in order to do this, we have to be Brix testing and trying to hit our goals of total grams of IgG of 300 in the first 24 hours. So this is just a proposal. I'm not suggesting you do this. I'm suggesting you think about this and talk about this as a team on your farm. Is 3 liters for Holsteins the first feeding, 2 liters for Jerseys, and then following up with 1 and or 2 liters in a bottle. And then finally, cleanliness. This is a big one here, right? We've got to know what our bacterial counts are, and that this is within our control, right? In terms of what types of cleaners we use, how we sanitize, how often we clean, do we reuse equipment, yes or no? So thinking about a plate count of less than 10,000, total coli count less than 100, and then the closer to 0 you can get on E. coli, the better. And I know you can do it because I have farms that have been able to do it. So I want to say thank you so much. I know we're at the top of the hour. Next hour, thank you so much to all the attendees, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Barb. That was a really excellent presentation. And to view this webinar again or any of our previous webinars, you can visit our archives at any time at www.hordes.com/webinars. We really hope that you'll make plans to attend our next webinar, which will take place, note, Monday, July 21st at noon Central Time. This is the 3rd Monday of the month. We're adjusting for July. Corey Geiger and Abby Prins of CoBank will discuss market dynamics that continue to reshape milk checks. Then in August, we'll have another familiar face with John Gazer of Progressive Dairy Solutions covering making the most of this year's corn silage. And we had some questions come in, Barb, if you'd be willing to answer those.
Sure.
So the first one came in ahead, but I think it'd be great to just revisit or re-emphasize what you had said. What is the correct amount of first colostrum? And you talked about the quantity and quality. Maybe just if you want to just share that once again for our listeners.
Sure. So I think, again, we've got, in order to have any discussions about how much we feed, we've got to know our Brix score, right? And Brix score is just a proxy for IgG, right? So perhaps, and this will depend too on the breed of your calf, but ideally, if we can feed a Brix score of 25 for that first feeding, we could feed Jersey calves a ½ gallon, 2 liters, and we could feed Holstein and beef breeds 3 liters first feeding.
Fantastic. And then another question that came in ahead of time is 2 times correct in 24 hours, again, related to colostrum.
Oh, that's a great question. So one of the challenges that may come up is those calves may spend more time, depending on what time of day they were born, they may spend more time in that maternity area. So farms are generally offering another feeding after the second feeding, anywhere via a bottle, anywhere from 6 to 8 to 10 hours later. And some of them just have it on a set interval when they want to offer that bottle before they're going to go to either a calf raiser or just get moved to their own area. So yes, great question. There will always be calves, and sometimes it helps. I didn't show this, but I have a client who they have a chart and it lays out time of day the calf is born, like first feeding, second feeding. Here's the time that calves are going to get moved or picked up out of the maternity area. So here's the window of calves that's eligible for number 3.
Great. Another question that had come in during the webinar. When do your clients move cows to the maternity pen?
Oh, that's a great question. It's very, all of them are very different. Very, very different. And I'm going to use maternity pin to say, do we actually move them out of a close-up or super close-up pin into a separate individual calving pin? Not all of them do. Many of them, they will have either usually 10 to 21 day window that they've got animals in a close-up group. So you've got your your far off dry cows, you've got your close-up cows, those girls are in a group, they're right next door to the maternity area. Some of them will then go and bring individuals into either individual pins or individuals into a smaller pen for expected calving. But we really here are always thinking about what does that do? How does that interfere with her calving, or could interfere with her calving, right? What's our expected days carrying calf based on the average for the farm? So we're always thinking about that. And oftentimes they're staying in a group and they're calving in their group.
Great. We have a question about the cow here, kind of on the same vein. Do you have an opinion on special, I would say, drench for cows for postpartum?
That's a great question. I really don't. I don't, just because I've seen folks can just use warm water. They can use a product like YMCP. You could use any type of electrolyte. I don't. I would definitely check with your herd vet, check with your herd nutritionist, and find out if there's something to recommend. And the other thing I would suggest is, if we are drenching a lot of cows, I would just make sure, okay, is there some bottleneck on accident that, yes, I think it's a wonderful thing to do for the cow is to provide her those fluids immediately, but it does come with a time cost analysis and time cost benefit to think about. So is there any way that we could provide her that drench in a place where she could drink it rather than having to be physically administered fluids? I would think about that. It's awesome if you're offering her individual warm water with electrolytes or something like YMCP. That's awesome. So
Great. Another question on calves. Do you recommend letting the calves nurse their colostrum from mom?
ooh, okay, very solid question. In our current systems right now, I do not personally have a cow calf, what we would call cow calf contact system. And I would have to understand more about the challenges. I know big picture, right, what some of the challenges are just in terms of sometimes the responsiveness of the cow and the safety of the calf. I personally don't have any clients that do that currently. So that's the reason why we intervene and support that calf by collecting the colostrum and feeding it directly. I would love to learn about more farms that are doing this, but right now I don't, and I can't. So because of that, I can't recommend that you change your system, because then there may be other consequences at this moment that we haven't considered.
Great. What kind of role does insulin play in obtaining a good IgG transfer?
That's a tough question, because I've got to say straight up, I don't know, and I would need to do more research on that. So I don't know who asked that question, but wonderful question. Thank you for the question, and I will find out more about insulin and IgG.
Great. And then I think this is more about just calving time. What's the best time to pay attention to different calving for cows and heifers? As far as probably, I'm interpreting that as intervention on calving.
Okay, good. Okay, very good question. So signs of calving, right? So the ideal situation is as you start to have relaxation, of course, and you start to have essentially smoothing of the vulva over time. And as all the wrinkles begin to smooth out, and she's up and down, she's by herself, right? As soon as you start to see any type of progress, or you think there should be progress, the ideal is check on her every 20 to 30 minutes. And if she hasn't made progress, that's the time we at least go and examine her, put a clean glove on, and just make sure, hey, everything is as I expect it to be.
Fantastic. Well, that was all of the questions that came in. So, oh, we have actually a bunch more that have come in, but I know we're running short on time.
Feel free, if you want to send me those questions,
Yeah.
I can either put them in the comments on YouTube or however you normally handle excess questions, because I technically went longer than, yeah, usually there's more time for questions built into the hour, so.
Well, we'll get those questions to you. We'll get them answered and we'll get that to all the attendees. Or I love the idea of YouTube as well. So that was a great idea. Well, thank you, Dr. Petersen, and thank you to our listeners. We appreciate the time you spent with us today, and we hope to see you in the audience in a future webinar, or you can tune in to our Hordes Dairyman podcast available on YouTube or your favorite podcast player. Until next time, thank you from our team here at Hordes Dairyman, and thank you, Dr. Petersen.
Thank you.